Hello, everyone, and as always, welcome back to Strategy Gaming Dojo, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. And today we're going to jump back into our basic tutorial for Gary Grigsby's War in the East 2. And this will be part 13. This will be the final part of our production and logistics section of the tutorial. And before we get going, now this time we're going to really focus on the end user. So we're going to go look at these units and we're going to look at their supply details and talk about what all of that means. Where are they getting their freight? How are they getting that turned into what they need? But before we do that, I wanted to back up for a second because if I get something that's not quite correct, I want to make sure that you guys have the right information. And so I've been mentioning, let's go to Riga, and there's a few things I want to mention here that kind of go into the big picture. Now, I've been mentioning that rail yards, it really hurts you if this is 5% or above damage. Incorrect. That is not rail yards. That is ports. It is ports. So when ports have 5 or more damage, they suffer. They go down to half of the amount of freight that they could handle otherwise if they're an import port. And so in this case, in Riga, it is exactly 5. Okay. Well, how much freight could Riga normally hold? Well, when it comes to ports, whatever the port level is, in this case it's a 4, you take that times 7,500. Okay, now I'm no mathematician, but I believe that's 30,000 in freight that can come through this port on a base level. Okay, base, if we're not talking about, all other things being equal, a size 4 port can bring in 30,000 tons of freight because it's 7,500 times the 4. All right. With rail yards, it's 10,000 times the 4. So ports just can take a little bit less, even at the same size, okay? But if a port has 5 or more percent damage, that gets cut in half. So in Riga's case, it would be 15,000 of freight that could be taken in by that port, all right? With rail yards then. So let's talk about what the rail yard damage actually is. I got those mixed up and I was talking about that with respect to rail yards. Now, rail yards has kind of a funky thing going on. We'll talk about it. I think they may eventually patch this because it seems a little too much, too variable to me. But let's talk about how the system works for now. And that is a level 4 rail yard, all other things being equal, everything's good to go, no damage. It's your rail yard, it's a level 4, would get 40 or could have 40,000 in freight. All right, that's its stock, its rolling stock of rail yard. Now, other rail yards may use that, but that's a little more advanced than what we're talking about here. For our purposes here, really all you have to remember is a size 4 rail yard, 40,000 in freight. Okay. Now it's damaged at 27%. So that goes from 0, no damage, to 100, maximum damage at the rail yard. Okay? The game does an administrative dice roll for this rail yard, okay, on a 100-sided die. Imagine that little sucker. I mean, I've played some Dungeons and Dragons in my day. I'm not sure if I've seen a 100-sided die, but luckily we've got the computer to do that for us. It rolls against this. If it passes the roll, so 28 to 100, all right, then it's like everything's all good. You get 40,000 of freight in here. If it doesn't, if it rolls a 1 through a 27, let's say, and fails the roll, then what this rail yard can handle in freight gets divided by 10. All right. And so for the visual people out there, for a rail yard, it's a size 4 rail yard, it's times 10K. It's always times 10K. If it was a size 2 railroad, it'd be, 20K. In this case, it's 40K. All right. Then it has a 27% chance to fail this roll. So 27% chance that it fails, 73% that it passes. But if it fails this roll, then this 40K gets divided by 10 and it's only 4K. All right, and that would be A failure, a major failure. Now that seems really, I had to go back and read this 3 times because I said, really? It gets divided by 10? That seems like a really variable difference. It can show you why you really need to repair these rail yards and make sure that you don't fail one of those tests because it's really going to cut down on your rail yard stock. Now, keep in mind, okay, and again, this is a more advanced topic, but not really because ultimately when you're playing the game, you're not going to be doing these calculations per se. Keep in mind that Riga, even if it failed its test, it can pull rail yard points from other places, okay? And so you have this kind of this idea of a rolling stock of railroad. And so if one fails it, it's not the biggest thing in the world. It can pull rolling stock from anything that's a size 2 rail yard or above that's within 30 hexes of it. And you may say, my gosh, man, that sounded really complicated. But again, when you're playing the game, you won't be thinking that. What you'll be thinking is, I've really got to work my butt off to get Riga's rail yard repaired because it's a big rail yard. It's got 20, you're going to fail it 1 out of every 4 times the roll. I've really got to get that repaired. And so we've got it on priority repair. The game supposedly automatically does that if it's a port and a rail yard. I decided to spend the 1 AP just to make sure in our Let's Play. This is our current Let's Play. I decided to do that up here at Parnu. Parnu has a size 2 port and a size 2 rail yard, so we're definitely getting the penalty at the port. It could normally bring in 15,000 tonnage. Now it's 7,500 in tonnage because it's over 5% damage. The rail yard, we've got a 44% chance of failing the administrative check on the rail yard. It could normally bring in 20,000. That may go down to 2,000 if we fail the roll. So that is that. I just wanted to make sure we had that all straight. Another thing that I've had questions about, well, you know what? While we're on there, let's just talk about this for a minute. During this Let's Play, if you're not following the Let's Play yet, and you want to watch all the tutorials first before you get into the Let's Play, in the Let's Play, I went and moved all of my construction units, so these construction battalions, and for the most part, these RAD labor detachments into my army groups, okay? Now, those could be at Corps headquarters, they could be at Army headquarters, they could be at Army group headquarters. But let's talk about why you would want them at the Army group headquarters. Well, especially when we're talking about these RAD labor detachments, these are rail repair. Now remember, we have rail repair on the map, right? We have those primary rail repair divisions. Here's one of them. Here's another. We have those on the map that we control, but we only have 5 of those, right? We have 4 German ones and a Romanian one. Is that right, or do we only have 4? Let's do, gosh. Sometimes I forget. They added this Romanian one in a patch. What's this? Yeah, this is first Romanian. So we've got 4 German ones and 1 Romanian one that we directly control, all right? But there are those special battalions like this one. It's on the map. 8th RAD Labor Group, 12th RAD Labor Group that also repair rail, but you don't directly control them. They're controlled out of headquarters. The headquarters will send them out to do rail repair, and they can be very helpful. They connect lines, they can fill in the lines behind the gap, because if we look at our map here and we look at railroad, I mean, we've got a lot of red here. We have green moving through, but see, for instance, like that's blocked right there, so this doesn't even connect up into this rail line. All right. Down here, we could make a connection. This is major rail, some of this down here, right? But we don't, we're trying to move these guys to the front, the ones we actually control, as fast as we can. Here's a good example. Now we're moving this main one through here, but it won't connect there. This may not connect up. You can use these other rail repair, and they're always those RADs that I showed you, labor groups. You can use them to repair this rail and connect some of your rail lines, but you cannot directly control them. So what's the best way to get them where you want? Well, you can directly put them into headquarters and they will start to go about and repair rail near those headquarters. But if you think about it, what has the biggest range of command that's actually really on the map? I mean, we don't really use OKH, it just sits back here, right? Army Group Center is right here. Army Group North is right here. Army Group South is down in Lvov, right? They have got a 45 command range. And so those labor groups can go out, from Army Group Center here at Brest-Litovsk, they can go, all the way up here and be repairing things where the game sees fit. Now, again, you don't directly control it, so you kind of got to, lean on the AI to pick the best routes to go. But wouldn't you rather have them in units? So, I mean, if we look, this is controlling this army up here. It's 31 hexes away. So that rare rail repair, that anything that Army Group Center controls, can go all the way out here. And you'd rather have that than the Army Group. Now, I do have these two. So I've got this one in 4th Army. It's connected to 4th Army. All right, and it's the only support units you'll see actually detach from headquarters and go out on the map for the most, but generally speaking. There are something in this game that you can convert onto on-map units. There are some support units, but for the most part, generally speaking, this right here is the one battalions you'll see out on the map. And so these headquarters release them out to start repairing rail. Now I want to tell you a couple special rules about this. There was a question in the comments saying, well, hey, I don't see these guys out here. Why aren't they working? Well, one reason that may be is you have them in a headquarters. Now, I will say, even though, or a core head, of course they're in a headquarters, but a core headquarters. Now, one thing I will say about these core headquarters is that when they're controlling rail, they actually have a command radius of 15. Normally it's only 5, but for some reason with rail, they can control out to 15. And you can see that because as a matter of fact, one of these cores I thought was controlling him. Is that not right? It's 4 of 15. Well, the point being is armies can only go out to 15 hexes, corps can go out to 15, army groups can go to 45. All right, so you generally want all of those labor groups to be in your army group headquarters because they can just go forever. Um, Now, I would go back to the point that someone had asked the question, why don't I see mine? Well, these units have got to really find a good rail section and start there. They don't like to start in Minsk and go backwards, okay? And so it could be that you're too far forward, what you have them attached to, and they can't get back there, still be in command range and come forward. Because if there's one thing, and I'm not saying this is straight out of the rule book or something, this is just from playing the game a million times, or War in the East 1 a million times. They do not like to work backwards. They like to go find good rail and come forward. So just something to keep in mind there. So we have these coming out of 2nd Panzer Group. Again, you can see it's actually 15 of 15 away. It went as far away as it could, and now it's going to start building back here to 2nd Panzer Group. This one also went back to where I think, yeah, it went back to where there was good rail from our main one, and now it'll start building forward. And this is a very helpful line to get built. If you think about it, it connects kind of our more northern to our southern right here at Minsk. So super helpful to get that connected. Something to think about with rail repair. I just wanted to go into that because there is some confusion usually with these, but try to the extent you can put them in your army groups. At the very least, put them at the army level so they can go out 15 hexes from there and repair rail every turn for you. You don't have to do anything. It doesn't cost you anything. They're just connected to those. Okay. One other thing that I wanted to talk about that as we've been playing the game has been found out things become more apparent. There's some things you can read in the rule book, but you just really got to do them. Now, I have been lamenting the fact that I was not getting these ports, these export ports, okay, in white to export to import ports. It just wasn't happening a whole lot. Well, I have kind of come to the realization that was my own fault. It wasn't the game's fault. And so, one thing to always keep in mind with these ports is for an export port to send freight to an import port, all right, it's got to be in the same C zone. And you may say, C zone, what? Essentially, everything in the Baltic can ship to each other. All right. And so, the Baltic sort of ends right here game wise, but everything in the Baltic can go over to other things in the Baltic. Same thing down here, all the way to the south. Uh, Yes, there we go. There we go. Let's get off here. The Gulf of Odessa, everything in the Gulf of Odessa could ship to each other, but they can't go from like the North Sea, for instance, into the Baltic, or vice versa, or all the way down to Odessa. You can't do an export port here and expect your freight to show up in Odessa. It has to go across the Baltic here. So what I've done in our Let's Play is I've changed all of these to export ports. All right. Now, eventually, when they do make a War in Europe game, these, you wouldn't be able to change all of these because some of them would need to be importing, whether it be steel or other raw materials, let's say, something like that, into Germany. But if for the purposes of this game, Berlin is going to produce 2,500 tons every single time, and it doesn't matter what you're quote unquote importing. There is no importing in this game. All you're doing is shipping freight. So you can kind of forget about the logistics of production itself. Production happens, then you have freight, and then it's your job to get the freight out to your units, okay? So all of these ports will be pulling freight from Berlin, all right? They'll be coming up here and they'll have this freight. They're already getting some, right? Now, the problem I was having before is some of these I had set at a level 2. You don't want to do that. With export ports, you pretty much always want them at a level 1. 1 means they will pull freight, but very important here, and maybe this kind of goes without saying, but I think it's worth reiterating because it's the most important concept out of these 4 videos, which is depots will only send freight to depots with a higher priority. Okay? Level 1 depots, 1 priority depots, will not send freight to other level 1 depots. They will store it, they'll hang on to it. They will send it to level 2 and above depots. So none of these depots will send freight to each other, right? And the problem I was having is I set these little level 2 because I wanted them to get more freight up here, okay? Makes sense, right? But if they're a 2 and these import ports are a 2, they're never going to send freight to it. And I had Memel at a 2, I had all of these at a 2, and these were at a 2, and they're not going to send freight to a depot with the same priority level. And so what was happening is this stuff was getting up here, and you can see how much they've stored because there was no place to send it to. They were a level 2, these were a level 2 all along the coast. Now I've got them down to a level 1, and this freight that they've stored, they will try to send to Memel. They'll try to send it up here to this level, or this priority 2 depot, La Paja. They'll try to send it up here. They'll also send it straight across here. And you may say, well, what's the point of that? Why are we just going straight across here? Well, eventually we've got so much going north that these railways out here, now these are roads that you're seeing, but if we took the roads off, these railways out here will start to get burdened. A few of them are starting to turn a little yellow, but eventually they will start to turn orange and red because you can imagine, I mean, there is a lot of freight that's going to be moving up here through East Prussia into Königsberg up to Memel through the railways. So we may as well, if we can, kind of cut some of that off and just put it on transports because we have those. they're not doing anything. It doesn't cost us anything, so we may as well use them to unburden the rail lines as much as we can. All right, okay. Um, so those were the major points I wanted to hit that we've just kind of been learning as we go along. All right. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is supply priority at the unit level. Now, I don't want to spend much time talking about the old game, but I know I have a lot of people here that played War in the East 1. And as a longtime War in the East 1 player, the hardest thing I've had to get used to in this game is that freight. If I say supply, I mean general overall freight, okay? Freight used to, or what we used to call supply, would go to the headquarters and the headquarters would distribute it to its divisions, okay? And all that mattered was how far away your headquarters was to the closest functioning rail, which was called the railhead. All right. So let's say that we had built out our rail to this point. It had been repaired to here. This headquarters would look to this quote unquote railhead to go get its what is now called freight, back then was called kind of big general supply, and bring it back to the headquarters. Then it would pop it out here to the units. So back then, all that mattered was keeping this close to the railhead and keeping your divisions or regiments in this case within 5 hexes of the headquarters. Now, for those kind of freight purposes, headquarters don't matter. Just get that out of your head, okay? Every division or regiment, broken up division now looks for its own supply by itself. Okay, and where does it look to? It looks to depots. It doesn't look to anything called railheads. It doesn't look to where the rail is repaired or not repaired, whatever. It looks to a depot that's got freight and says, give me the freight, give me the freight. Now, the one spot where headquarters do come into that is supply priority. All right, and it's right here on every headquarters unit. Supply priority. We can go back to actual 1st Panzer Division. Um, that does not have it there because it's not a headquarters. 16th Army overall headquarters, supply priority. We go back to Army Group North here, supply priority. Now you can set this supply priority for all of Army Group North right here. If you click on this, you can say none, low, medium, high, or very high, and every single unit underneath the command, and I mean not directly, I'm saying even indirectly under the command of Army Group North, will have that same supply priority if you set it at that level, okay? If we go to 16th Army, same idea. You could set it here for everything either directly or indirectly under the command of 16th Army. Now that will not affect 18th Army, okay? It would be set just for 16th Army. If you want to affect both 18th and 16th Army, you would set it here at the Army Group North level. So it gets both of them and it gets the Panzer Division, or I'm sorry, the Panzer Group out here, which is, of the same size as an army. The Panzer Group out here would also get set to that same priority. All right. So let's look down here at the Panzer Group, 4th Panzer Group. We have that set at a 3. So the Panzer Corps and the Panzer Divisions are all set at a supply priority 3. All right. 16th Army, if we go back and look at 16th Army, they're all set at a 2. And what is 2 again? Medium. All right. So we've got I can just tell you, spoiler alert, I've got all of the infantry armies right now set to a supply priority 2. I've got the Panzer Groups. 4th Panzer Group is set to a 3. 3rd and 2nd Panzer are set to a 4. And if we go back here to 2nd Panzer Group, you can see right here, supply priority 4. All right. 4th Army, again, supply priority 2. 2nd Army, I actually have it a 1, and I really need to bump that up. Let's bump that up to a 2. I want all of my, and when shoot, I should have showed you this. dang it. But when I did that, it changed all of the cores underneath here to it to a supply priority 2, and it changed all of the divisions out here then ultimately to a supply priority 2. You don't see them on the divisions. That is all run at the core level. Okay, and so you can go and set these how you wish from Army group to Army to core levels. Okay, and then when you get to the core level, everything under that core that's commanded by the core will be the exact same as what you said the supply priority of this core is. You can't go all the way down to the division level. It's set at the core level at its lowest, okay? At the lowest command is the core level. Now, you may be saying, well, what's the big overall grand strategy of that? Well, the supply priority is, of course, every unit in the game will try to get supply, but the ones that have higher priority will try to get more. They generally will get more. They reach out to more depots to try to get it. There's more dice rolls involved, so if they fail one dice roll, they'll try another dice. When I say dice rolls, this game just does a bunch of calculations. I call them dice rolls because I'm old school. Basically, they're checking the general's administration score. So whatever the general of this headquarters is, in this case, it is von Wilktorn. Von Wilktorn has a 6 admin score. It will constantly be checking that to see how much supply the divisions, or the regiments in this case, under von Wilktorn, how successful they are at getting the supply that they request, or the freight that they request, okay? And so what am I doing here? Well, if I were to make one of these a 3, one of these infantry divisions, they would most likely get more freight. I mean, will they every single time? Maybe not. They may fail more dice rolls, more administrative dice rolls. They may be further from depots. There could be all kinds of factors, but by and large, all other things being equal, they will get more freight than something set at a supply priority 2. And so my big overall strategy for this generally is to try to get as much freight to the panzers as I can. So the panzer groups, the panzer corps are your most important element as the axis, and you need to try to get them, make sure they have enough fuel. All right, well, you can't pick fuel. You have to get them as much freight as possible, and then they can turn that freight into fuel. Now, a few other, I'm just going to kind of gloss over this a little bit, but just one other thing or two other things to think about is that airfields need supply, and your air command also has supply requirements. So if we look at our air command like 8 Flieger Corps and we look at this, it also has a supply priority. Now with air commands, that is truly set really at the Luftflotte level. And so if you look here, supply priority right there is a 2. Right now I have all of my air assets at a 2. If for some reason we start running really low on fuel and we cannot fly missions anymore out of our Flieger Corps, out of our Luftflottes, we may have to up that. But right now I have their supply priority on a 2, so they're on an equal footing with the infantry. Now some people may say maybe you would want your air assets to be at a 2 because they're a little further back here, they're a little closer to some of the more functioning depots. Some of these are a little ways away from a functioning depot. I mean, we have these that have come online now. Um, but a couple of turns ago, these were not online, and we were already out here, right? Everybody was reaching back for Minsk down here. So you may want to have your air assets at 2, infantry at 3, panzers, all of your panzers at 4. I think that's valid. Or you may have a very important, like let's say when 18th Army gets to Leningrad, we may really want to focus on beefing up 18th and 16th Armies for their assault on Leningrad, and you may pump them up to a 4 for a turn or two so that they get more freight, they've got more bullets, more fuel, more food, right? Those are the things that freight gets turned into, and replacements, strangely enough. You wouldn't think of it that way, but for these to get replacement elements, whatever that may be, mortars, tanks, rifle squads, whatever the element is that's in that table of equipment, for these units to get them, they get it based off of quote unquote supply and asset priority. All right. Now, if they're in refit, they also get a boost or a bonus to that when it comes to replacements. But kind of think of replacements as moving along these rail lines along with your freight. Okay, so let's get out here and actually look at a unit. And as part of that, I want to hit the number 8, the hotkey 8 on the keyboard. All right. And you're going to look at this and you'll be like, oh my gosh, it's like a beautiful mind, the movie. But when you look at this, it's either that or it's like when they're tracking a serial killer and they've got all those strings up on the board and it's like this face is connected to this face and what hotel did they both stay at or something. That's what this looks like. But what it's really telling you is every unit in the game, where is it getting its freight from? And you can see almost all of 18th Army is getting it from Riga. All right. I say almost all, but it's not all. This unit up here, for whatever reason, decided to get it from all the way back here at Memel. All right. I mean, that's a long ways away. So Memel supplied or sent freight to uh, a unit here, a unit here. Riga sent stuff here and here, but it also sent some freight out to Ninth Army. All right. So these red lines, when the lines are red, it is showing you depot to unit. All right. And you can trace where every bit of freight of every unit you've got. Look how much is coming out of Minsk, right? It's pretty much all of 4th Army, all of 2nd Panzer, some of 9th, some of 3rd Panzer, I think, is getting it. We're now starting to get freight out of here, and this is good. You want it to be as close to the units as possible because it takes trucks. It takes trucks to go back to these depots or to go out of these depots to the units. And if the units don't get enough, they're going to send their own trucks back, and you can get a real truck shortage. Now, truck trucks in this game are a big overall concept. You're not going to be worrying about one truck, coming out of by the Davina River here, and it's traversing this way. It's kind of abstracted that, oh, it took 22 trucks to come here. And if you get way too far away from a depot, the real way for you to think about it when you're first starting out playing this game is the further away you get from the closest depot, the more trucks it's going to take and the less freight you're going to get. And I mean, that's just really every hex that goes by, the less freight you'll get. And so you're going to want to constantly be building depots as you go along, as close to the front as you can. That's why it was so important we took Vitebsk. Vitebsk will turn into a huge freight depot for us. So will Smolensk, right? Because we're getting very close to Moscow and they can really supply freight out to our armies almost to the gates of Moscow. So it's very important. Riga, very important. Taking Pskov this is going to be a huge depot for us because eventually it may be sending freight to every dang unit we've got attacking Leningrad. Okay, and so you can really see these relationships. Now then, you see white, and you're like, what? What is this? He says, I didn't mean to make that sound too dramatic, but white is depot to depot transfers. All right. Now this is showing white, and you may say, hey, you told us 3 cannot send to 2, or 3 cannot send to 3. That is true. That's because this was a 2 last time, and 2 sent to 3. And you can start to see the relationships of the depots. 2 sends to 3, right? 2 here was a 2 sent to 3. 2 or some of these back here, well, Berlin's a 0, right? It's sending to 1s. It's sending all over the place. Berlin's the big daddy of them all. Vienna is sending obviously to a lot of places. Prague is sending to depots down here. Those are all 0s. Same thing in the south. You can see where this came in from. You can see that this depot sent it here and then it went out to the units. What are the big general basic rules about this? Oh, one more thing. And I'm not sure we have one because I didn't set it up correctly. We don't. Shoot, we don't have one. Port to port, so next turn, when we go from this port to this port or this port to this port, those lines will be in blue, a very dark blue from port to port. And so you can tell when your export ports start sending to your higher priority import ports by a dark blue line. All right. And so you can see every dang, relationship in the game when it comes to freight. So let's take that off because when you're looking at that, you seriously can't focus on anything else. And let's go down here to, I don't know, let's just pick this unit, the 258th Infantry Division. All right, it's part of 7th Corps. Let's right click on that. And well, first of all, actually, let's go to 7th Corps and we'll look at 7th Corps. And 7th Corps has a supply priority 2. So all of the divisions underneath 7th Corps will also have a 2. Now, you can't see it on here, but they do. Um, Okay, and let's go to supply details. And, if you want to get in the nitty gritty of this sucker, you can get into it. I mean, you can go down here and see everything that you need to know about this unit, where, oh, you know what? This isn't a great example. I actually want to show one that's already pulled some freight this turn because it's showing us turn 6 here. Okay, this is fine. Let's do this one. 11th Infantry Division. All right, 11th Infantry Division. 11th Infantry Division is part of the 1st Corps or 1 Corps if you want. 1 Corps is set at a supply priority of 2. If we wanted to go to the commander's report and look down at everything that's in 1 Corps, we could do that, and that includes the 1st Infantry Division. We can go back out here to the map, the 1st Infantry Division. Let's look at supply details. All right. Current status, priority 2. We already knew that, right? It doesn't show you that on the card, but everything under 1 Corps or 1st Corps is a priority 2. Supplies, how many does it have in the unit? 158 tons. How many are required? 219. So it's asking for 219 and it didn't get that. It only got 72% of that. All right. How is all of this calculated to some degree? Well, the freight comes in and it gets turned into these things based on what the headquarters, its core headquarters, thinks it needs, essentially. Um, and so all of these admin roles will be happening based on its core commander. And if its core general or commander fails those, they'll go up to the army level. If the army level commander fails them, it'll go up to the army group level. That's how command works in this game. And I'll do a whole video about it, but essentially think of it as the core general or the head of the commanding general of this corps is doing these dice rolls or has to pass them for it to get everything. But even if he does, and you can see right down here, admin failures, Modal did not fail one dice roll. We had 0 penalty from our general, and it still didn't get everything. That's because of the distance away from the depot. That's because it's only a supply priority 2, and if there were supply priority 3 or 4, they maybe got precedence over it. Okay, so there can be a lot of factors to that, and you can always go down here and you can see, did my general screw up? Is that why I didn't get everything I wanted? Nope. Modal did his job, penalty 0. Okay, so when the freight got out here to the unit, 158 tons of it were turned into supplies, 31 tons turned into fuel, 503 were turned into ammo, 275 vehicles, and 519 support. Now, these are already in the unit to some degree. I mean, these are the big 3 that you're getting from freight. These are kind of always present in the unit, and they're based on whether it's in good command radius. This could be based on how many of these have treated or how much attrition there has been. If they're going a long way to a depot back and forth, your trucks will suffer attrition. So anyway, you can go and look at the percentages that you have in the unit for each of these things, all right? And then turn 6 supply depots, or supply, I jumped ahead there, supply details, okay? This will tell you depots, and a unit can try to pull off from as many as 5 different depots. Now, usually it's only going to be 1 or 2, but they will be listed here, all right? And it says range 14, movement points 29. Okay? What is this about? Let's go to the pencil. The big overall most important rule to remember about this is 30 and 75. And it's an and. It's not an or. It's an and 75. All right? And that is 30 hexes and 75 movement points. A unit has to be within 30 hexes and 75 movement points away from a depot to try to get freight from that depot. All right? 30 and 75. And when you're setting up your depots, thinking about your depots, you may actually want to sit there and count how many hexes away from certain places it is. You know, if we know we're going to Talon, we may count up here how many hexes away from Talon is Riga. Can we still pull off Riga from these units that get to Talon? Once we get to Leningrad, how far away is that from Pskov? Well, that definitely is not more than 30. It could be more than 75 movement points, though. We've got a lot of rough terrain here. Hopefully the game could trace through here and it wouldn't take more than 75 movement points. But if you fail one or the other, it's not going to try to pull freight from that depot. All right. So it's very important to remember it's an and. So this tells us right now it's pulling from Riga. That's where it got its freight this time. 14 range, 29 movement points. All right. Freight received 56. Freight lost 33. And you may say, Jiminy Christmas, it lost half as much of freight as we actually even received. Why is that? Well, it's because of these numbers, 14 and 29. You're a little away from the depot. Now, you're still within range where it will pull from Riga, but you're getting a little further away. We may need a temporary depot up here so we quit losing so much freight. That, you know, is kind of an abstraction of trucks go overturning, looting, I don't know, partisans. It could be a lot of different things, right? But freight loss 33, that's a lot. That's a lot. We need to get a depot in Talon so we'll stop losing so much freight. Vehicles received here, it tells you 0. You got none from the depot itself. And then it comes down here and it shows you exactly what you received. 56 supplies, 25% of what you really wanted. Replacements, negative 135. It would have, if you had all other things being equal, it would have gotten 135 more individual little elements, but they didn't because we're a little far away, okay? Supplies consumed, 66 tons this time, all right? Admin failures, we talked about that. Then it goes through no manpower, no supply, no fuel. It'll tell you no if you got no to any of these things. Let's go down here and, I don't know, let's just look at this regiment so we can kind of go through it here. Same idea. I mean, it tells you all of the same stuff. This is pulling off of Minsk. This really breaks down what you received and what you didn't receive, okay, in the turn, and how much you actually consumed as opposed to how much you requested, right? And so this is how much you've received, then this is how much you've used. And admin failures, that was 0 again. Good generalmanship. I'm sure if we looked at some of these generals that aren't quite as good, we may have some admin failures. But really, that's supply. Remember, 30 and 75 away from depots, but every hex you move away, you get a little bit of a penalty, okay? And so every hex away from Riga, you can see here, we're not pulling off this depot yet. How would I know that? There's no red bar. It didn't send anything out. We could also look at the 8 or look at the 8, hit the 8, and you can see it didn't send any out. Why is that? Well, we've just set this depot up, okay? Now down here at Riga, you can see the red bar. That means it started sending freight out. Pskov has not. We just took that this turn. This actually has not, which it should be, but it's got a bigger depot down here, really. I could probably get rid of this one. That's sending out freight, and when you hit 8, you can see that. You can see in red where it's sent out freight. And then you can go to the individual units and determine what's going on within those units, how much they're getting. Is it bad generals as why they're not getting enough? Is it because you're too far away from the closest depot? So it's 30 and 75. And always remember, depots only send to depots that have a higher priority. So this will not send to this. It will send to this. Okay? And I think we've covered a lot of logistics there. I think it's pretty, good. If you have any questions at all, please put them in the comments or come to Discord. Come to our Discord. I mean, just sign up. It doesn't cost you anything. Obviously, you don't even have to look at ads over there. You can just type whatever you want. Just don't get crazy on me. Or at least use asterisks if you're going to curse. But come over to Discord, ask your questions. There's a lot of knowledgeable people. It's not just me sitting there answering questions. I don't even claim to be knowledgeable. There are a lot of people that know how to play this game or are learning this game along the way and can oftentimes, help you with something they've also struggled with in the past. So sign up on that Discord or just put it in the comments here at YouTube, and we'll try to get those questions answered. Anyway, this has been Strategy Gaming Dojo. When we come back next time, I think we're going to talk about commanders, headquarters, and units, whether they're in command or not. All right. Have a good one. Thanks. Goodbye.